Hi, everybody. My name is Weston Bleibach. I'm the president of the Historical Society of Woodstock. We have a nice turnout today, I see. Happy Saturday afternoon to you all. This is a special event commemorating the Woodstock Festival weekend at the HSW. Today, we're going to celebrate Levon Helm and the Midnight Rambles. Levon Helm was the band's drummer and a 40-year Woodstock resident. As he began recovering from throat cancer in the early 2000s, he and his manager, Barbara O'Brien, organized house parties. These morphed into storied midnight rambles. When the gigs began to attract top acts like Emmylou Harris, Elvis Costello, and Donald Fagen to jam with Levon and his band, the event started to sell out regularly, and at the same time, resurrect some of the old magic of the Woodstock music scene. Levon Helm, Rock, Roll, and Ramble, John's book, chronicles Levon Helm's fairy tale comeback from throat cancer and gives a blow-by-blow account of events leading up to Levon's Grammy Awards. John Barry, a writer for the USA Today network in Poughkeepsie, New York, was invited to Woodstock in 2004 by Barbara O'Brien to interview Levon and never left.
It was her fault.
His well-written book faithfully captures the excitement of the Midnight Rambles and the return of Levon to national prominence. In addition to John and Barbara, Levon grew close to Cathy and Tom Gagliardi, who actually came to attend the ticket booth during the Midnight Rambles. And we also have a special guest, Cindy Cashdollar, who also So luckily for us, we have with us today John Barry, Barbara O'Brien, Cathy and Tom, and Cindy Cashdollar, and to discuss the life and times of Levon Helm and the Rambles. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here today. Thanks to Weston and the Historical Society for having us on this very special weekend, which carries some special meaning here in this community. So my name is John Barry, and I was fortunate enough to get to know Levon Helm while I was writing for the Poughkeepsie Journal. As Weston mentioned, I literally was in the office one day, and the phone rings, and it's Barbara O'Brien on the other end. I jumped at the chance to interview Levon. He was starting these Ramble things that I had heard about, just hadn't gotten to track down the right person who would have been Barbara. It was on my list, and I just couldn't quite figure out what was going on. It was in his house. Did they start at midnight? I just couldn't put it together. So I, at Barbara's invitation, went up and interviewed Levon, and I'll never forget it. It was, I think, a Monday afternoon about 5 o'clock. I show up to the barn, and there's all kinds of people coming and going. I was standing with those days of a notepad and a pen, and standing where the band plays now, and Amy Helm came out, and I chatted with her a little bit. And then here comes Levon in his bathrobe and walks up, shakes my hand. Yes, sir. No, sir. Thank you, sir. And I was just in awe of the whole thing. This is Levon Helm making me feel like I was the most important person in the room. There was no rock star, no ego, no nothing. And what was it you said, Weston? I never left?
Yes, you never left.
Yeah, pretty much the truth. I started hanging out more and more at the barn. Thank you, Barbara, for always welcoming me in there so warmly. And at some point, it occurred to me that Levon, in addition to his wonderful autobiography, This Wheel's on Fire, could be in a position to write a book about the Ramble time period in his life. And I think I mentioned half jokingly to you about it, and it didn't really kind of go anywhere. And then somehow it came up again a few months later, and Barbara, in her infinite wisdom, and Barbara has no bigger fan than me.
No.
No.
Don't argue that one.
These two.
It's all about you.
she said, great idea, but Levon wasn't a, we're going to talk every Thursday at 2 o'clock kind of guy, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say, so, what was it like to be in the band? What was it like to play Woodstock? He just wasn't that kind of a guy. He was more of a let's sleep on it kind of guy. So Barbara said, just hang around with your digital recorder and be a fly on the wall. And that's what I ended up being for the next 8 years or so. Had a digital recorder. Who in here went to a midnight ramble when Levon was with us?
Was there?
Yeah. So after the show would end and Levon would walk past and raise everyone's hands, he would go inside the living portion of Levon Helm Studios, and I was invited to go right in and position myself in the kitchen, which was kind of the green room, the post hang. Levon would kind of hold court with the opening band and his band members and friends of his, and just kind of chatting and telling stories. And it was just nothing like when he had the attention of the entire room. There were moments where there could be maybe 15 or 17 people packed into his kitchen, and Levon's there telling a story about Turkey Scratch, Arkansas or something. And boy, everybody was just waiting on, what he was, they were hanging on his next word. And then I would be over in the corner of the kitchen recording everything. So this went on for years and years. After the Ramble, I would travel with Levon down to the Beacon Theater, Vermont, Boston. I took the tour bus out to Tennessee and the Bonnaroo Music Festival in Columbus, Ohio, and Chicago. There were times where I would fly out and meet the band and kind of travel in tandem and take trains, planes, and automobiles and meet them in the next city, in Tulsa or Little Rock. But through this all, whenever I was with Levon, my recorder would be going. So I have hours and hours and hours of recordings. I took those recordings, found a story thread, and wove it into this book. So in this book, which is for sale here today, signed copies, you will find content and information that you won't find anywhere else, because there were a lot of times where I was the only other person in the room with Levon, or it was Barbara or Chris Howe, who was Levon's driver. So no other writer spent as much time with Levon as I did during this period of his life. So everything you get in this book is, as they say, straight from the horse's mouth. It's from Levon. These are his quotes. And you won't find it anywhere else. But there's also a lot of context there. I interviewed the band members. Barbara has her own chapter. If you know Larry Campbell, a wonderful musician, the music director, Larry has his own chapter. Team Levon, which brings us to Tom and Cathy, where this band of volunteers who Levon would be the first to tell you, without their support and their faith and involvement, the Rambles wouldn't have become what they became. And maybe that's a good point of entry here. When you drove to...
Oh, it's okay. No. I switched something. It's okay.
No, that's fine. We can make it work.
It's a ramble.
Well, let's get to the ticket booth in a sec.
Yes.
Different side.
No rush. Yeah, no.
You knew Levon. You performed with him going way back. One thing with this book that I tried to get to the essence of was, who was this guy? I was just chatting before the program started and saying he didn't want to talk about the band. He didn't want to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He wanted to talk about tractors and college football. That's the guy that I got to know.
And woodpeckers, don't forget the woodpeckers.
Woodpeckers. In your opinion, out of everyone in this room, you have such a unique perspective on his life. Who was this guy, Levon Helm?
It's going to take about 3 more books. Truly. I mean, I think he was just like an endless well of his life, which was an endless well of so many experiences, And I mean, seriously, or maybe Barbara got to the bottom of the well. It was so funny. I grew up here in Woodstock, and I remember when the band moved here, because at that time I was living on Wittenberg Road, and And so some of us would wait on the corner of Glenford Road and Wittenberg Road for some of them to drive by after
Really?
school.
Wow.
And Garth, of course, you could set your watch by, and we did, because every day at 4 o'clock, and that was a big thrill, hang by the Wittenberg store, see if Garth would come down Glenford Mountain Road at 4 o'clock on the dot. The other ones, not so much. But I met Levon at a New Year's Eve party where I was invited to jam in the 80s, and shortly after that, started playing with he and Rick, and my husband at the time, Frank Campbell, that played bass, and eventually Jim Weeder on guitar. But we were doing acoustic shows in the area and in New York City and New Jersey, and it was really on those car rides back and forth and in the dressing rooms to hear the stories, and they were amazing stories, and I wish I had had a tape recorder, but I didn't think about it. But you know, Levon to me was, he could have been a native of Woodstock. I mean, he was just so ensconced in the community, you know. I mean, he wasn't just, he was the rock star, but he was also the local guy that did a lot of things for the community. When he met people, I think it made everyone feel like they were special and part of Woodstock, and certainly part of the Ramble and part of his life. I think he was a Southern gentleman, a Woodstock person, a man of the universe. But he really was also, besides a good friend, it was very educational for me early on when I started playing, to be able to play with people like Rick and Levon, and Paul Butterfield too. I mean, that was the best musical school, truly, that I could have had coming up, just starting to play slide guitar. And it was just a wonderful, supportive people, Levon was, and Rick and Paul, and couldn't have asked for better people to work with, you know, really. And just to be friends with. I think they really would have given you the shirt off their back, you know. And then later on, moving on to the Rambles, it was such a thrill to see this huge thing happen locally from this one person that I went to school with.
Yeah.
And just to see not only everything grow from the Ramble, but also Levon to grow in that direction was truly amazing. It was just a different thing that I think a lot of people got to see.
Yeah, one thing I tried to capture in the book was, you know, Levon's story is, in my opinion, is this quintessential American comeback kid. I mean, we love nothing more as a nation than a good comeback. You know, someone who's really up against the wall, you know, whether it's, you know, Indiana Jones hanging from the vine over the rushing river and he somehow gets back. But we just love a comeback. And this was, I hate to use this phrase because it's a cliche, but this was a comeback for the ages. And you two both have perspective on Levon when things weren't so rosy. You know, in the book, Barbara, you talk about going over to the studio, and, you know, at the time when Levon was down on his luck. What do we learn from Levon in terms of resiliency and the, you know, the human spirit and, you know, kind of beyond the music? What did Levon Helm teach this community and this nation and this planet?
Don't give up. Just don't give up. I mean, there's always something waiting around another corner. I can't take credit for his success, or this second encore, as Bill Flanagan from CBS called it. Levon was the kind of person that he did things on his terms when he was ready for it to happen. So I just happened onto his life when he was ready for things to be different. He wanted to go in a different direction. He didn't want to wallow in the, you know, the band stuff that was going nowhere for him. It was a battle he couldn't fight. He didn't have the energy, he didn't have the money. It just wasn't worth it. So thanks to the team that we were able to build, we just kept him moving in a positive direction to build on the music he wanted to create, until he finally got to the point, and Tom and Cathy can attest to this, we stayed away from band music for a very long time. It was too painful for him, I think. And it was one night, Jimmy Vivino started off being our band leader before Larry came in. And I was downstairs talking to somebody, and I always had one ear listening to whoever was talking to me and one ear to what was going on upstairs on stage. And I remember this one night, I just heard Levon starting to sing The Weight. And I apologize now to whoever it was I was talking to, because I literally left them, and I don't think my feet touched the stairs, and I ran upstairs. And the entire place, grown men crying tissues, to hear Levon, of all band songs, to sing The Weight, which he vowed he would never sing again. So it even shocked Jimmy Vivino, because Jimmy thought Levon was saying, in between songs, he thought Levon leaned over and said, "Wait." And he thought Levon wanted him to wait. And he said, "Oh, you want the weight?" And they played it, and I'm not lying when I said there wasn't a dry eye in the place. So it was very emotionally, and then after that, before you know it, we'd slide another, not we, Larry and Jimmy would work on the set list back in the kitchen before the show, but they'd slide another band song and then another band song, and then before you know it, he was comfortable, because he realized he was very proud of the music they made. You know, it shouldn't hurt him. Political things within the group that happened afterwards is what hurt him, and he realized he could separate the two. So I don't know what kind of a tangent I just went off.
Well, no, you know,
That's
like,
good.
you know, you were talking about the
I think the Rambles gave Levon another purpose in life.
Yes.
Long before he got ill. I think it was, and that's what kept him going. I think he had a purpose and a goal to live up to
Yeah.
every weekend.
And that southern thing that Cindy said,
Stubbornness.
well, yeah, stubbornness.
Did you say southernness or stubbornness?
But I think he saw himself more as a member of this community. And the one thing that Levon was very proud of was that, I guess in the South where they come from, the biggest thing that you could ever achieve is being a member of your local Chamber of Commerce. So once we got established, we joined the Ulster County Chamber of Commerce, and every year they give you this little plastic plaque that, every year you replace the year with. So here we have in the basement, we started to collect all of his gold records that he had given away over the years, and all of the awards, the Grammys that he had won. We had everything on display, but if somebody came to visit and I was there, he didn't send me downstairs to get a gold record or a Grammy. He said, "Go get that Chamber of Commerce thing." And I would have the Chamber of Commerce plaque up to whoever was visiting, because in Levon's mind, if you could be a member of your local Chamber of Commerce, that's what meant you made it. So that's what I learned from him, that aside from everything else, all the gold records and the Grammys, he still was a local guy who wanted to be recognized by his community.
I think something that plays into this, and this, I really, really, really tried to capture this in the book. This really drove my whole writing process, is Larry Campbell in the book, he mentions, Levon, he always remained true to who he was going back to Turkey Scratch. And he said, how can he lived in Woodstock for 40 plus years and he never lost an ounce of that Arkansas accent. And he just, and people hinted at this in various ways, for better or for worse, he remained true to who he was. And maybe Cindy, you saw Levon through many different chapters of his life. Would you agree? And Happy Traum says that in the book also. He, even in the Ramble time, he was still the same Levon I knew way back when,
Oh, I agree 100%. 100%. I really don't think he never changed, ever. I think he was just always Levon, and I really can't imagine him changing. I think he enjoyed himself. I think he was very proud of where he came from and of his legacy and what his legacy, how that made him who he was, both personally and certainly musically. And I just can't imagine Levon wanting to be different. You know, I think he was a very proud person
I
of,
don't
like
think
I
he'd
just
know
said,
how
where he
to be.
came. No, yeah, there's
He's
just
just
no,
him.
there's just no way.
Yeah, there was no airs, there was, it was just him. You got him all the time, right down to where, you know, I ran into him one day at CVS. He was gonna go into CVS in his bathrobe because he needed razor blades. And I said, I'm on my way to the studio, you should have told me, I would have picked him up for you. But he would double park, leave the car running, leave Muddy in the car, and then run into whatever store.
Barefoot.
Yeah, well, no, he has little
Cowboy boots.
slippers on.
I used to see him at the house in bathrobe, the Japan bathrobe, and a ball cap and cowboy boots.
That's how my mother met him, in his underwear. She didn't know where to look. She was like, so nice.
That's how we met him.
We're talking,
There's a couple of other people, and I don't want to take control of this, but Rennie Cantine he grew up with Levon. Ralph Lignini back there, another, I don't want to call you old, but like old-time musicians. They all have fascinating stories too, not now, but if you can get to them before we end.
yes, we
they
got
just-
plenty of time.
They have all things to share.
One thing I wanted to mention in terms of Levon always remaining Levon and always being Levon is when we were talking about this book, still like in the germination phase, he said, you know, one thing we got to do with this book is we got to talk more about the movies. You know, Levon, of course, had an acclaimed acting career, The Right Stuff, you know, Coal Miner's Daughter. But I think on par with those is the 4 or 5 minutes he did in Shooter with, who was that? No, was it Shooter?
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg, where he's talking about the Kennedy assassination. And having talked to him about the Kennedy assassination, just between me and Levon Helm, and then to watch him in that, it's just him. You know, sitting at the drums, it's just him. He doesn't care about celebrity or anything like that. You know, acting. He's just being himself. Has everyone seen that movie and that scene where he talks about the shovel and everything? I mean, if you haven't seen Shooter, watch it because it's worth those 3 or 4 minutes. And that just gets back to what I tried to do with this book, is to capture the essence of this guy who, you know, this riveting guy who just, you know, people hanging on his word, who wants nothing to do with any of it. You know, he just wants to act, he wants to play music. And I think another thing that illustrates that is Tom and Cathy, if you went to the Ramble, the first place you came down the driveway and you hit the ticket booth and you would have met Tom and Cathy. Would you have had a clipboard or?
Back in the beginning, we had the clipboard.
Yeah.
So they would check you in.
Old-fashioned way.
Yes. And
In frigid cold.
rain,
and the heat.
freezing rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Any kind of weather, but we did, it was a labor of love.
Yeah.
And
Once-
Barbara was always trying to make it better and easier for us. You know, we'd show up one time and she's like, oh, I got these new jackets for you. And I
I
think,
got boots for you.
Yeah, I got boots.
hand
I got
warmers,
hand-
feet warmers. She took the
Jesus.
best care of her staff.
Mm,
I've never worked for anyone like Barbara,
yeah.
ever.
Volunteered for anybody.
Well,
Until,
Yeah.
well, technically until Levon insisted on giving us some
Yeah,
gas
it was
money.
like
right?
gas money.
Yeah, but we were like, no, it's okay. And Barbara's like, take it.
So some of the best stories, I think, in the book come from Tom and Cathy at the ticket booth, because here you have, you know it if you went to the Ramble, just people literally from all over the world coming to Woodstock, to Levon Helm's, agog, you know, dumbfounded. And then they pull up and they roll down the window and boom, it's Tom and Cathy. And one story I loved is, Cathy, I think you said that Levon would blow you kisses from the house?
Well, not me personally, I don't think, because there were like the other co-workers around us.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, Levi was very happily married, so, but yes, he had a balcony off of his house, and we were busy working, it was just before a show a couple times, and he would be out there blowing kisses down away. And it just was just such a great.
Be up there waving to him.
Yeah.
We got it covered, don't worry.
It was just such a great experience, it really was. And thanks to Barbara for bringing us on. I just have
Yeah.
to.
That's a story.
digress
That's,
a
that's,
bit.
that's a
Yeah, that's a great
Tom
story.
can tell
Let's hear that,
story really well.
which is in the book, by the way.
Yeah, well, you know, we, Cathy and I had decided to come up to Woodstock for the weekend. It was in around July 4th,
Yeah, it was.
2005. So we just came up here, and on the way up, we're listening to some music. I said, I think, I'm not sure who from the band is left up here, but, they're one of my favorite bands. Anyway, we come into town, and we go to one of the head shops, and we see a poster for Midnight Rambles, and I think it was actually Levon and Sammy's name was in it, little Sammy's name was in it. The blues
At
band
that
or
time, it was
something.
probably the Levon Helm Blues Band.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a
I think it
thing
was.
called the Ramble, and a date, which we were there that weekend, but no time, no information, no address. And so we were asking the guy in the shop there, like, what's this all about? Levon's up here, he's one of my heroes, I'm a drummer, and he's one of my heroes. And they're like, oh yeah, he does these shows at his house. Well, where's the house? Oh, it's on Plockman Lane. I was like, where's Plockman Lane? Like, come on, you gotta help me out.
Pre-GPS.
It's so Woodstock, and so it's like, well, go down here and you turn left, and we go down Plockman Lane, not an inkling of
Sign.
an indication that this was Levon Helm Studios, right?
You called, you hadn't even gotten there
Well,
yet.
not yet. No, this was before I called
Well, you went up Lewis Hollow, didn't you?
What happened was, we were thinking there'd be some kind of sign that said Levon Helm Studios or something. We blew right past it. We're going,
Back and forth.
we kept thinking, well, it's got to be up ahead. Next thing we know, we're up in the sticks. We're up in the
Probably up Lewis Hollow.
Lewis Hollow. It wasn't Plockman Lane anymore. So whatever that is.
You
right?
started to climb.
Yeah, we're going uphill, and so I'm like determined to find out what's going, because we wanted to go to that show, and it was that night. So it was in the afternoon. So I'm calling, signals dropping. Finally, back in those days, if you got a signal, you stopped, you froze wherever you were, and you just like, don't move. We got a signal. And then Barbara picks up. I didn't know who she was. And so what's going on with these shows? We want to go to a show. And Barbara's like, oh, we had to cancel for some work going on in the studio, whatever,
Yeah,
whatever was going on. But it's not happening. And we're like, oh, really? We're up here. We wanted to go to a show. She goes, well, let me ask you, do you know anything about computers? And I'm like, yeah, a little bit. What? So she says, well, come on.
Well, let me
by,
jump in for 1 second.
Yeah, I might.
Because in the
so-
book, I recap this, and it's Tom explaining Barbara stopping, going, wait, do you know anything about computers? And you just happen to work for a global networking
Yeah.
computer company at the
At
same
the
time.
time, yeah.
He's like, yeah, I know a little
And there are a
something
couple
about
of two
computers.
Yeah. Thanks, John. I forgot. I'm trying to.
Why I'm
keep
here.
It is your book. Barbara had welcomed us come down, and she's like, help me get this thing. We just got in Levon's new CD, and we're trying to play it on the computer because we felt bad that some people came up here for the weekend, and because the show's canceled, we're doing like a meet and greet. So come on by, and you can hang out with everybody after you get the computer going. So it's, okay, we go down the hill, and we find a place, and we come in, and we're like, wow, this is amazing.
Where was Levon at that point?
Well, Levon, at that point, I didn't know at the time because I came and I saw you, but he was holding court down at Lake Levon.
He was
his
rowing
pond,
people around the
in
lake.
his underwear. That was his bathing suit.
His denim underwear.
You talk about him being a minimalist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he owned a bathing suit. I think it was just his underwear, and that was it. So we were like, okay. But we got the darn thing working, the DVD, And Barbara said, okay, go down to the lake and let Levon know that we got it going and to bring everybody in. So we go down to the lake, and there's the man, Levon, one of my heroes. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what do? I never was so starstruck before, one of my heroes. And he came up and greeted us like we were old friends, like I was just taken aback by it. And he welcomed Cathy, right? You're like,
And from that day forward, that man remembered our names with all the people that he met throughout his life and throughout the shows. He never forgot our names.
he didn't forget our name that day. And there was all these people there that Barbara had invited to meet with him. And he's, there was kids and everything, and he's back and forth fishing with the kids, coming back out. And then I, since Barbara asked me to do this, I was tasked with telling him, Levon, you got to come back to the building now, because Barbara's got this DVD I'm like, Levon, you got to do this. And I'm like, here I am telling this guy what to do. And anyway, he said, let's go, Tom, we'll do it. We go down there, and on the way back, he's talking. He was asking us all the questions, and I'm like, no, I got to know this. I got to know that. And of course I found out, you don't do that. But in my mind, I'm saying, I want to hear about the last waltz. I want to hear about this. And all he wanted to talk about was woodpeckers and where we were from, what we did, and I'm like, that's not what I expected. I expected him to be kind of a rock star or somebody who's, he was as grounded as you get.
He was as grounded as you get, and one story I tell in the book.
Cheers.
There's something there.
It's been laced.
Levon, forget about the celebrity, forget about being a rock star. There was one Ramble where Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead was playing at it. Mike Gordon from Phish was in the audience. Jane Fonda and Catherine Keener. I don't know if everyone remembers when they were filming Peace, Love, and Misunderstanding here. That was in the midst of all that. And so Phil Lesh's set ends, and in between that and the Levon Helm set, I was in the kitchen being a fly on the wall. People coming and going, it's packed, et cetera, and there on the other side of the kitchen table, Levon's talking to Jane Fonda. So I'm just trying to vanish into the wall and do my thing and, capture everything. And Levon comes over to the refrigerator where I'm standing to fill up his ice. He loved ice. 2 solo cups, a lot of ice. Boylan's grape soda, right? And he looks at me and he goes, John, let me introduce you to Jane Fonda. And he grabs my arm and he pulls me over, and I'm freaking out because I have no idea what I could possibly have to say to Jane Fonda or why she's going to want to meet me. So Levon brings me over and he goes, Jane, I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine, John Barry. And I was flabbergasted and my chin hit the floor. But he so diffused celebrity, and right in that moment he diffused any notion of celebrity. That was his friend Jane, that was Jane's friend Levon, and hey, I was just another friend being introduced. And I think that kind of speaks to what you're talking about down by the pond that day. And
exactly, and we, after being there for a while, and fast forward here, Barbara invited us to work there, and you said something before about Levon, the struggles he was going through, and we had no clue until like an hour later or something.
Which just let me jump in. Cancer of the vocal cords,
right.
Multiple bankruptcies, on the verge of losing the barn.
Radiation.
Yeah, yeah.
We had no clue. I mean, he was as happy to be alive. And, I'm going to tell this one little side story here, that that day when we met and we got back to the house, and we went upstairs to look at the studio. Barbara said, you can go upstairs, but don't go into his house, only stay in the studio. So we're like, okay, fine, that's cool. We go up there, and you know, Levon's having a smoke, and he invites me to go out on the balcony with him. I think actually you kicked us to the balcony because there was kids there, so we were like, go out on the balcony. So we got on the balcony and just having a smoke with him, talking, and he goes, you know, he looks up at the sky. He takes it, and he looks at the sky, blue sky. I still have that picture. And he goes to me, you know, Tom, it's a great day to be alive. I'll never forget that. And I didn't really understand the significance until an hour later when you told us everything he had been going through. And I was like, this guy is alive. He wants to live. I didn't get a sense that he was down on his luck or all the shit that he was going through. It was really amazing.
A lot of people would have given up when it just made him stronger.
And he just, the rest of that day with us there, he was playing with the kids, he was doing this, signing this and that, and like you said, like we wouldn't see him for like an hour or two later, because the property is big, and he remembered our names. And it was like, I didn't remember anybody else's name there.
Everybody was in shock that day, and like Tom had said, it was, I can't remember why we canceled the show, but we did. And there were some people we couldn't get in touch with. So that became our general rule, that Janine and I would be at the studio, and if people still showed up, we would give them swag, Levon would come out, he'd hang with them.
Yeah,
That
right,
day was during the
right.
day though, and when he was rowing them around, I can just picture those poor people in the rowboat, probably like in shock.
Who's this guy in his
that
underwear?
Levon was rowing them around in a rowboat. And I didn't even think of that, all I thought was, we're trying to build this reputation, we're trying to build this community, we want everybody to be happy, we want everybody to like us. So we went overboard. I think we even made hamburgers that day or something.
Yeah, well,
Something to make them happy.
you were always doing something. I mean, like I said before, right? We would come up and we were like, what did Barbara do now? You know, and
And
I
they
mean,
would
how
come
many-
from New Jersey every week, by the way. It wasn't like they lived in Kingston or something. They drove a couple of hours to get here, and after the show, a couple of hours to get back home.
And that was emblematic.
Tony lived.
What was that, John?
Your driving was emblematic. Tony LeBeau, who
Yeah.
secured the LevonHelm.com domain name and ran the website, was 4 hours one way
Shelter
From
Island.
Shelter Island.
for years. 4 hours one way.
No matter what the weather, that man came.
He was
People
there.
came from all over just to help, because they wanted to help, and what a great thing to be part of, you know? I mean, great music every week,
It was a piece of history.
yeah.
We kind of, for us, we felt like we were living, watching this whole resurgence of Levon coming back from nothing, right?
And Woodstock
Essentially.
had nothing going on at that point either. All of the music had pretty much shut down when the DWI laws came in, the bars weren't staying open, and music just kind of disappeared. The Ramble was the only thing going on.
Yeah, not to interrupt you, but let's talk about that for a second, because we're here at the Historical Society of Woodstock, and this is the Woodstock Festival weekend. You know, you had all these people coming into Woodstock to go to the Ramble and to see some great music, but you also had them renting rooms and eating at restaurants and filling up their tanks with gas. When I was at the Poughkeepsie Journal, one thing I tried to write about as much as I could is the impact of the arts on the economy. I mean, we all go to these shows, we have great times, and then we go home. But they employ people. You know, places like Levon Helm Studios or the Bardavon or UPAC, you know, they need things, they buy things, supplies, they hire contractors and electricians and engineers and all that. And that, Levon Helm Studios was such a great example of how the arts drive the economy. I mean, week after week after week for months and years, sold out crowds. You know, I'm sure many people went to the Pinecrest after the Ramble, or went to, you know, Cucina for dinner beforehand. And, you know, keeping that Woodstock festival spirit alive to some degree. You know, we can't overlook that. And just to make a little bit of pivot, I've been looking at your list there.
My memory's very poor.
Can you give, is there a best ticket booth story?
Well, there's many. There's some that just will always be in the vault. Some of the best are, first of all, I have to say, working with the people that worked with us at the booth. We had Margaret, we had Jeff, we had Charlie. So it was just a great thing, just a family feel altogether.
Extended family. Yeah.
But as far as the ticket booth goes, yes, we do have a few stories. One in particular was when some people tried to sneak in, some young guys it was, tried to sneak in. They decided to go through, next to
The woods.
Levon's house was a whole wooded area. Well, they got lost, and they got scared. They ended up having to call the police to come and get them out of the woods. And the police had come and told us this. And we felt sorry for the kids, but of course we couldn't let them in because, I mean, there was no room to put them. Every show was sold out. And then we would have people come in, and I think Barbara would know this because we would always have to go to Barbara or Tony to see if it's okay that people come in that were not on our list. How many cousins did we have? We'd run in, Cousin Elmer's here, Cousin Joe is here.
Travel all the way from.
And they weren't really his cousins at all, as we know. And I have one more to tell you, which we always got a kick out of. A car with about 6 fairly young guys in their early 20s pulled in. Show was sold out. Do you remember the show at all? I forget who it was playing that night.
Oh.
But every show was a great show and sold out. Anyway, these 6 guys pull in, and we ask them what their name is. And we have all the names right here, right? And they started off with, well, we're under the Smith name. Okay, so
Jones.
we look under Smith. Okay, what's your first name? Nope, we don't have that. Try Jones. Oh. Now, after working at the ticket booth for the years that we worked, you kind of learned all the little tricks that were going on. And so when they went through all the names that were somewhat common, we told them, you really aren't on the list, are you? And they're like, no. They had to admit it because they couldn't come up. And Margaret, I'm sure you could vouch for that because we heard it all out there.
The worst thing that could happen the day of a show is if Levon went into town.
Yeah.
Because he would run into anybody and say, come to the show tonight. Well, in his mind, in his head, he was saying, come to the show and buy a ticket, but he would never finish that sentence. So we'd get tons of people saying, I saw Levon in town today, he said to come to the show.
Yeah.
So we were very diplomatic.
We were talking
Yeah,
about
Barbara was great.
the head station.
It was like a relay system, you know, like, you know, well, can you get a hold of Levon and tell him that I'm here? And you know, we'd have to make a judgment call, like, does this seem earnest, you know, this person?
Yeah.
So we'd go chasing Barbara, and we'd find her somewhere. And I got a little story, but we were just talking about before about, I interrupted her one time with Warren Haynes, and I didn't know who it was at the time. He wasn't playing there, he was just visiting. I had no idea. We're running around like chickens without a head, and I go up and I say, excuse me, sir. Barbara, we got this situation. And she's like, Tom, meet Warren Haynes. And I'm like, oh, sorry, Warren. And he's like, no, dude, it's cool. Don't worry about it. You got to do your thing. You know, he was great. But I don't know, where was I? I was telling a story
Just so,
about
let me
this.
jump in. You never knew who was going to be at the barn or at the Ramble. I mean, Barbara used to say you never know who's going to show up.
That is true.
Kind of in that same vein, I remember walking in once through the double doors, which were on the opposite side of the walkway that you go up. And it was during the opening band or something, and I remember going, you know, opening the doors, shutting the doors, kind of taking my jacket off and just turning like this. And who was standing by himself in the dark, in the corner like this, but Jackson Brown. And it's just like, only in Woodstock, only at Levon's. And he was just watching the music. It was crazy.
And the guests were the same way. Like, nobody was there starstruck general. I mean, there was probably a few people here and
They
there.
were
maybe.
starstruck over Levon.
Yeah.
You know, we might have been going, holy crap, Phil Lesh is here, but Phil Lesh
Yeah.
couldn't believe he was, you know, at Levon's house.
Yeah, he was like, I remember sitting with him at the bench behind the drums, and I'm like, hey, Phil, you know, great to meet you, you know. And he goes, I'm really nervous right now. And I'm like, you're gonna be playing in front of 200 people? I mean, he's like, yeah, I'm just getting ready, you know. He's like, you know, he was really nice and everything. I was like, wow. you know,
We
somebody
found out-
like him, and he was like getting all jacked, and he had a smile, because he was playing with
I
his
remember that
son.
smile,
Remember,
yeah.
it was the first time in public he was playing with his sons, his two boys. It was at the Ramble.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
We found out that Ricky Skaggs was gonna be playing at the Dutchess County Fair, I think it was. So on a whim, I got in touch with somebody, his manager or somebody, and I said, hey, we live on Helm Studios, it's not really that far away. You know, I know it's short notice, but if you wanna stop by, stop by. So we have the Ramble, I can't remember who the guests are that night. The show is over, and we're at the ticket booth, and we see commotion up at the end of the driveway. And sure enough, here comes Ricky Skaggs, the whole band with their instruments
Remember
strapped on them because the band wouldn't, the bus driver wouldn't drive down the driveway. He was afraid the bus would get scratched. So here's Ricky Skaggs. So I'm like, holy crap. We take them into the house. We had cleaned up everything. We had it ran like such a well-oiled machine that, you know, we knew what the set list was. So by this song, we start cleaning up downstairs. We start cleaning up catering and everything. So there was nothing left. And back in the day, like I said, Woodstock literally shut down 9, 10 o'clock. There wasn't a restaurant open. So Levon has the guys around first he invites them up on stage and Ricky Skaggs does a whole set. Levon invites him in the house and he calls me up there and he called, everybody was baby. You were either bro or brother or
Son.
partner or baby. So it was
Hey,
like,
son.
hey baby, why don't you get these guys something to eat? So I said, sure. And knowing full well, how? There was so this, and I don't tell a lot, well, I'll be telling a lot of people now. There were musicians downstairs eating. We literally took their food from them, made up plates, and ran it upstairs to Ricky Skaggs. So Ricky, if you're watching, truly sorry. But you apparently didn't get sick.
Desperate times.
You know, I think Cindy, remember, you should tell the story if you want to, but.
Depends on which one it is.
That's
Well, it
right.
was about when you lost your grandmother's ring.
Oh,
Do you remember
my
that?
God, here it is.
Do
Yes.
you want to tell how you were like, you were like really
I forgot.
freaking out.
I have a thumb ring that made up of stones from a ring that my grandmother owned, wore every day forever, and was playing at the Ramble or attending the Ramble, and I lost the ring, or thought I lost the ring. Everybody. It was like the cavalry. Everybody.
Yes. We all stopped.
Flashlights,
Yes.
outside, inside. Oh, it was amazing. It was like, I expected a St. Bernard dog with a keg of brandy to come
Or
and start
Levon.
looking, or
Was
Levon.
Levon there with the flashlight? Because he would have been.
I don't know if it was
I
right
don't know
after the
why
show.
it was.
What made it difficult,
Post-show.
I think what made it difficult was we were all cleaning up, right? So it could have got swept up.
Oh, yeah.
Or it could have gotten thrown out or something. It was we were putting chairs away.
Just like
So it
Barbara
was like
said.
everybody freeze.
Ran like a clock before the show was
Yeah.
over.
And I think it
Bang.
was Perry that found it.
Perry Gallo.
I think
yeah.
it was
He
him
might
that found
stop
it.
by.
And I think it was outside
Yes,
by my
Wow.
car.
it was.
In
It
the
was.
parking lot.
Yes.
Wow.
And it was cold, as I remember.
Didn't you wear it around your neck at that time?
No, I
how
should
was
have.
the neck
I
on?
probably
Oh,
said I
that's what you
should
said
have.
you should have.
No.
That's what it was.
No, it was on my thumb, and I think it was cold, and that's probably why it fell
You were
off.
so relieved. You were like, oh.
I was like, and embarrassed too. It was like,
No,
you know.
It was happy.
Anyway,
Your
it was.
grandma's, my goodness.
It was Team Levon
Yeah.
for everything. Finding lost children.
All Bar had to say is, all right,
Repurposing
everybody,
food.
stop.
Let me,
Thank you for reminding me of that.
That was a great
I never heard that story.
Neither. I don't even remember it.
That's volume 2, isn't it?
Right. Let me turn it open to the floor. And Rennie, anything you'd like to share about this guy, Levon Helm?
Oh, man, I love that guy so much from when I was 10. And he, my dad, John Brown, took care of all those guys when they came into town, because he was bartender at Dean's, and they all adored him. And, you know, for 30 years, Levon would take me aside and tell me stories about how special my dad was. And I remember my favorite thing, besides the fact that he would tell me to go out and chase the big 700-pound bear off the garbage with a gun. And I shoot him in the ass. He said, "It's not gonna hurt him, it's okay." And it became like, my chore. It was kind of fun. But the main thing that he did was like, he played at one of the guitar festivals, and I was gonna open up for him with my band, and Jimmy Weir was gonna sit in, and it got around, sound check time, and he's like, he came up to me and he says, "Kid, I've known you for a long time, and you've really gotten good at music, and, how would you like me to open up for you this time?" And I'm like,
Wow.
"Oh, shit, okay." And so, he says, "Arkansas game's at 8 o'clock, I gotta
That's great.
That's really great.
Yeah, he loved his football, right, Barbara?
Oh, God, yeah. Ralph, do you know Ralph? Ralph
Sure.
Denny?
Ralph, what do you got for us?
Oh, gee, I have a lot of Levon stories, but one that comes to my mind was I was producing a record. It was to benefit kids with cancer. And I got, Dr. John did a song, John Sebastian did a song, a lot of people did a song. I wanted Levon to do a song. So I wrote a song for him to sing. And I don't know how that hooked up, if Barbara coordinated, I can't remember, but I remember going up there, and Levon said he would do it. So I went up there one morning, and I knew Levon. I went up about 10 in the morning, or 9:30 in the morning. He's sitting by the fireplace with his dog, and it was early, I remember I was up late, and he said, "So Ralphie, let me hear the song." I said, "Well, I have a CD of it." He said, "No, you wrote it, can you sing it?" So here I am, his guitar, I took out the guitar. So here at 10 in the morning, Levon's sitting here, and I'm here, and I've done a lot of gigs. I never get nervous when I play or do gigs or do recording sessions, but I was nervous singing this song 2 feet away from Levon. So I sang the song, and then of course it ends, and you wonder, what's he gonna say? And he said, "Ralphie, let's cut it." So we walked over to the sound stage. The engineer was there, and he gets behind the drums. We mic up the acoustic guitar. I can't remember if I wrote a chord chart or not, but he played it once more for him, and he kind of mapped it all out in his head. It was quite incredible. He had the intro. He knew what transitions he wanted to do. He had suggestions for how it was going to end, and so we're all mic'd up. I couldn't sing the song while we cut it because I was playing acoustic guitar on the same sound stage. It would blend into the acoustic mic. So, but he remembered the whole song, which blew my mind. And we did the first take. I think we messed up in the middle. We did the second take all the way through. It was perfect. That was it. So now, time to sing it. But Levon's voice, went in and out at that time. Sometimes he could sing, sometimes. And this was a period where he couldn't really sing. So he said, "No, I just can't. I can't do it. I can't do it." So he said, "Will you sing it?" So now I'm standing in the mic with the headphones on, and Levon's right next to me with headphones on, and he's coaching me, like every line. He got the lyric sheet, and I'm singing it, and he keeps saying, "Pull it back into the beat, pull it back into the groove, pull it back." And I figured out what he wanted, and it was perfect for the song. And then after that, I could never listen to another band record without hearing how they all pulled their vocals back into the beat, and also how he drummed back in a bit. I had the opportunity to play with him playing drums and with Ringo Starr, and they both did the same thing. I can't explain it. Simple. It was like instead of stepping on the gas, they're up to speed, coasting at that speed, and they just pull everything back, and they just play the simplest thing, and the groove is just absolutely perfect.
Rick always
So,
said
quite
less
incredible
is
musician
Yeah.
and artist.
That was Levon's mantra too, less is more, no bells and whistles.
No flashing lights?
No flashing lights, he hated that whole big stage production, he just wanted it to be always like you invite people over for dinner, and there just happens to be some great music there.
Margaret, do you have anything wonderful to say you? Anything to share
Everybody know Margaret?
from the ticket booth?
Margaret worked with us at the ticket booth.
I did almost every job there from the beginning with Barbara. But then I worked with you guys at the gate all the time.
And made the best fires.
And
If
it
you
was-
need instruction on how to make a
I was
fire,
kind of laggy because I did the bonfires. And we had so much fun around the bonfires because they'd all come out and sit around and everybody would talk and you could hear the music perfectly. So it was one of the best seats in the house, really.
Yeah.
But Levon was a character. He had a great sense of humor, and he just loved everybody, and everybody loved him.
Mhm.
And that's why everybody worked so hard, because he just was that type of personality, that he was grateful for everything.
Mhm.
Always thanked you, always had a smile, always had a joke, you know, and he would have had us all live in bungalows around the studio, you know.
Didn't he tell you that one
Yeah.
time?
He
Yeah.
wanted everybody to live there. Then one
Yeah.
time he
Why
wanted
don't
me,
you
he said, we
stay?
gotta go dig up Rick and Richard and bring them here. And I was like,
Okay.
and he never called it being buried, he called it being planted. He said, don't you think they should be planted here? And I said, well, you just can't do that, Levon. You can't just go ask to dig up a grave and make a new one. But that's how, you know, he just wanted to. He wanted everybody to be close, you know, family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I remembered a story. I can tell you. This is the 54th anniversary of Woodstock, and I'm a native. But somebody asked me yesterday, about going to the festival. I go, I wasn't old enough, but I was babysitting for Amy Helm during the festival weekend.
Wow.
And so I was old enough to babysit, but not go to the festival. And Levon was married with Libby Titus at the time, and they lived on Plockman Lane. So I guess he really liked Plockman Lane, and that was my first experience with him. And then in later years, I worked for a musician who was in the Ramble band, Howard Johnson. I was his road manager, and so Levon recorded in his first studio that burned down, but we recorded an album there. So I have just weaving history with Levon. And I couldn't afford to go to the Rambles. It wasn't really affordable to many Woodstockers. But I did get invited there a few times, and it was great.
We always tried to accommodate. We knew, when Levon said $150 a ticket, I was like, whoa. And in my mind, I was like, this is never gonna work in Woodstock, but he insisted. So we knew it was too much money for a lot of people, so every show, I started doing Facebook contests. So everybody knew that the day of the show, tune in to Barbara on Facebook, because I'd ask some trivia question, and we'd let up to sometimes, 5 couples come to a show. Or if somebody was really down on their luck, if they got in touch, we never wanted people to be excluded. But because the place is so small, you couldn't offer that generosity to everybody all the time.
But it became a destination, really.
Yeah.
And we witnessed that at the booth when, people would come, and sometimes we'd talk with them either while they were pulling up or hanging out at the fire. And where you're from and this and that. All over the world, I think the most bizarre couple, at least for us at the time, they were from Afghanistan.
And then Japan.
And Japan. But
We had regulars from
Germany.
Spain.
we'd say, why, so what are you, traveling to New York and you heard about the show? And they're like, no, we based our vacation around coming here. I was like, wow.
He was brilliant. It was all his idea. If you watch The Last Waltz, he talks about the traveling minstrel shows, and they started at midnight, and they got a little dicey. So in the beginning, we did start them at midnight. Well, I had a full-time day job. I said to Levon, I can't start a show at midnight and then have one day off and then go back to work. So we finally got him to back it up a little bit to 8 o'clock,
So,
7 o'clock, whenever. Sometimes we had 3 bands. There was never a shortage of people who wanted to play there.
Hi, my name's Harriet.
Hi.
I'm a resident of Plockman Lane.
She rescued the dogs.
I have a lot of behind the seemed, because you guys were doing your thing, but there was a lot going on Plotin Lane, getting people to the Ramble. And I used to say, because I'd walked on Plotin all the time with my dog, or dogs, and I always used to think, if I had $5 for every person who asked me where the Ramble is, I could take everybody to Tuscany. But there's a lot of, I have a lot of Levon stories, very sweet, very kind. He left his CDs in my mailbox.
Oh.
He said to me once, he had a special apple pie on July 4th. And he said to me, I'm going to make sure you get a piece of that pie. And he did. And we just would chat a lot because of our dogs. And Muddy fell in love with my dog and would come all the time to the house to play with her. And she would not play with any other dog. She hated dogs, but she loved Muddy. And when she died, he came always. Until he died, he came to the house to see if she was there.
Oh.
And what has been mentioned a few times today, and thank you for this wonderful, Levon was obviously born with what he was. He's born who he was. He didn't become who he was. He was born who he was. And he had this incredible talent that just, when you were in his presence, nothing else existed. He saw you, only you. The crowd didn't distract him. He didn't look over there. He was like, you're it. You're the only person in the world. And he used to, very diplomatically, people living on Plotin were allowed to go to the Rambles. And that was diplomatic because we put up with a lot that you guys don't know anything about. Cars in ditches, you know, just all kinds of stuff going on. But he'd say, oh, I got something. I went to a few, not many, few. And he'd say, oh, I got a magazine for you. I got something I want you to see. What? In the middle of this huge bunch of people, he'd disappear and bring me something he'd saved to show me. And anyway, it was very sweet, very kind, and he just, when he died, just a couple more little things. Muddy stood at attention almost as people walked through, and they walked through, and Muddy was like this figure, and you could feel that he knew what happened. It was very moving. And when Levon died, it was a strength of spirit that you didn't realize was there until it was gone. And you could feel it walking past. You could feel the absence of this tremendous force of spirit that came from him. And I won't say it's gone, but it was diminished. And for a long time after Levon died, people would leave flowers at the mailbox and stuff. But anyway, I've gone on and on, but I have some wonderful memories of who he was.
Thank you, Harriet.
Thank
He
you.
adored you. Harriet rescued Muddy so many times. So he and Sandy
Lucy,
both.
and Lucy May, too.
Yeah, Lucy. Yeah, Muddy, when Harriet said he stood at attention, absolutely. I have a picture of Muddy that is so beautiful and it is so heartbreaking at the same time. If you've been to the barn, you know when you pull in, there's the ticket booth, and then there was a little rock wall with a lawn that went up. And the day Levon died, we all came back from Sloan. and there was Muddy sitting on that erect, just looking down the driveway. It was heartbreaking,
Picture of it?
because he wouldn't move. He saw each of us coming there and waiting for Levon.
Muddy, as you can see, Levon's dog Muddy meant so much to so many different people. I kid you not, he has his own chapter in the book. My favorite Muddy memory is the night Emmylou Harris played, which, was anyone there for that? Boy, the way I described it was, no, everyone stopped breathing because they didn't want to miss a note. What a show. I can't remember the sequence, but at some point, maybe it was after Emmylou had played, but Levon walked out of his living portion with a mandolin, and there was a stool on the stage that he sat down on. And Muddy, unbeknownst to anyone, had followed him out, and I think jumped up and put his paws right on Levon's lap.
We can picture that, too.
Yeah, and as if on cue, 250 people went, "Oh." That's how Muddy's chapter opens up. There was also, you might, I don't have the name. There was a dog named Jake. And I guess Muddy and Jake, when Muddy would go to a bank with Sandy, Levon's wife, the teller would give Sandy a dog biscuit. You know, you go to a bank and they give you, or for a kid, a lollipop. So the teller would give Sandy a biscuit from Muddy. So days later or whenever, Muddy would hook up with Jake, another dog, and they would go to the bank looking for a biscuit.
We would get a call from the bank that Muddy was sitting outside waiting for the
And then there was a dog that it's in the book. I think the dog was dying of cancer, and Muddy would go and sit with the dog for a few hours, and then just go home. I mean,
Yeah. He was the dog form of Levon.
Yeah.
Really. I'm surprised the dog walked, because the first year of his life, Levon carried him everywhere.
Ah.
We were like, oh my God, he's never gonna walk. He's been in little blankets, and that dog ended up with Levon's personality. He was exactly like him.
I don't know how many
And he
dogs.
understood every word you said.
I don't know how many dogs have been on the stage at the Beacon Theater in Manhattan.
You're
but-
right.
Muddy went on the road with us to the point where I put him on the rider. So we'd come in and Levon would have his little snacks, the band members would have their snacks, but there'd be a doggy bag for Muddy, and they'd have, so he came home with some pretty cool stuff. But he knew that dog was so in tune with Levon, because he couldn't read the set list, but he knew the weight, and he knew that the last time Levon hit the drums, and then Muddy would just casually walk out on stage, no matter where we were, Beacon, the Greek in LA, out would walk Muddy like, okay, come on, boss, let's go. He was incredible.
What about Lucy and having all those puppies?
We were getting puppies away at Ramble, so it was like,
Lucy was Muddy's
wife.
significant other.
Levon was doing a movie with Tommy Lee Jones down in the bayou. And we had already had Muddy. And so I get a phone call from Levon saying, hey baby, he goes, we got to build a fence. And I was like, okay, how come? He said, because we're bringing home a dog. So he rescued her from the bayou in Louisiana, and home comes, she was a wild one too, that one. Muddy was at least trainable. Lucy just did her own thing all the time. We got a half-assed fence built in the back of the house that didn't keep either of the dogs there. They were free to, Levon didn't think dogs should be locked up, so you can ask the entire town. Muddy would be all over the place, as would Lucy. But that's how Lucy came to be. And then they just kept having litters of puppies, and a lot of them.
I remember the one time we were having the Christmas party for the staff and everybody there, and Lucy was giving birth, right? So Levon would come out and hang with us for a while during the party, and then he'd disappear. And we were like, where did he go? And then he'd come back and he's like, well, Lucy had another puppy. That's number 4. Levon would disappear, come back, number 5, disappear, come back, you're up to 6. That was...
This is all in the book.
Oh, I forgot that was
That's in there.
You have,
Yep.
I'll tell you what, I mean, mean, we worked there for years and would still be there if we could. But John's book just makes you feel, whether or not you've been to a Ramble, it makes you feel like you're there again. And the stories from the musicians are just incredible. And I think I could read it 10 times and still pick up something different every single time. And it was, actually, in my opinion, a very well-written book. We love John. John Barry, actually, we call him. Nobody ever calls him John, it's always John Barry.
It's been that way my whole life,
It's like-
my whole life.
Yeah, it's like his name is not first name John, last name Barry, it's John Barry. But anyway, this book just makes you feel like you were there, and it brings back, for us, for the people that have been to Rambles, for people that have known them for a long time, it just brings back such great memories that it's just incredible. So if you don't have the book, I highly recommend getting it, I truly do.
I think the book is, you know, what's interesting about the book is it's not like a typical kind of chronological book, you know, that moves through all the dates and so on until the present. It kind of moves around, but like I think the context you put it in, you know, is what carries it. And so it doesn't matter where and what chapter, you can start in the middle of the book and it's just as well, you know.
Yeah, This Wheel's on Fire, Levon's autobiography, that was, you know, it was an arc. It was a beginning, a middle, and an end. This story kind of demanded a different approach. I look at it as more of like a wheel, and Levon's the hub of the wheel, and then you have the band, and Team Levon, and Barbara, and Larry. And thank you for those kind words. My driving the book was, if you went to the Ramble, I wanted you to read it and to say, yeah, this guy got it right. If you've never been to a Ramble, I want you to say, okay, now I get it. I feel like I've been there.
And that comes through.
And that's great. So many people in my travels, oh, you're from Woodstock. Oh, I really regret I never went to the
Yes.
Ramble when Levon was alive.
It's on my bucket list.
I told so many people,
many
go
people.
now. Go. Don't put it off.
It was the experience of my lifetime. It was 15 years of constantly feeling like we were in a blender, right? Because there was always so much going on, because he was in bankruptcy and foreclosure, so you had all of that legal, financial stuff happening over here. We needed to put the shows on, which is why they were $150 a ticket, and you had to pay everybody, and we had a mountain of bills to pay. We were paying off the current and trying to pay off his past, and we managed to do it. So, kudos. Tom, Cathy, Margaret are a small part of the team. There had to have been 20 people who were always there on a weekly basis, volunteering most of the time until we gave you gas money. Cindy took a lot less money than she would get paid anywhere else, and that was true with all of the musicians. It was the thrill of being there and being part of this rebirth for Levon, and everybody did it with a smile.
In history, too.
Yeah.
It was total history, and for me here, I born and raised here, but had moved to Austin, Texas in '92, and I was there for 23 years. But whenever I would come back to Woodstock, a lot of times I would get an invitation to come play the Ramble, and for me it was one of the most special homecomings besides seeing family and friends. It
So much fun.
stamped the homecoming.
Right,
Yeah.
so much fun.
Those Christmas shows were great when you came back, because we didn't really know exactly who you were, that you were living there when you were younger, but we would be behind the drums and Levon would look over and he'd say, "Welcome home, baby." And he was talking to me. I'm like, "Oh, she used to live here? I didn't know that." So, and then later on I found out.
These musicians play venues where they're treated like royalty, and they have dressing rooms, and they had special catering. We were trying to find a restaurant in town that would cook us something cheap, or in exchange for Ramble tickets. And everybody was squished into this tiny space downstairs. So my office became a dressing room, and I squished into Janine's office with Tony. The girls, remember there was one bathroom, which we'd have to close off the downstairs so the public couldn't use that bathroom so that we could let the musicians use that bathroom. And nobody said a word. They were used to such other higher class treatment. We did the best we could, and everybody had a great time, a lot of laughs. At the end of the show, after the musicians would go home, some of the musicians would hang with us. We would do what we called the debrief, and we would just literally sit there and have a couple of cocktails and just go like, phew, another one. We got another one.
And then the
now.
sun would come up.
And then the sun would come up.
And the
We'd
birds
leave and
would
the
be
birds would
chirping.
be chirping. Right, exactly.
You know, we
Exactly.
weren't from Woodstock, so we were able to kind of put everything into view pretty widely, and what we saw was leadership of Barbara stepping up and not single-handedly trying to do everything. Barbara knew what she was good at, and where she needed help, she would enlist people. So, you know, we didn't talk about, you know, the lawyers and the, all of a sudden I'm forgetting his name, who helped in the whole process of
There's a
that.
whole, that's why every once in a while on Facebook, I list the names
It's
because
funny.
there are so many people that
Frank
played into this success who were so far in the background, and I feel badly that I'm always out in the front. I didn't do it all. I just happened to be there at the right time, and like I said, he was willing for things to be different in his life. But we have attorneys, accountants, so many people, and so many other people, volunteers would cycle in and out too because they have lives. Not everybody could commit every single weekend to Levon Helm Studios. They wanted to, but they couldn't. So there's a slew of people. Vincitor, music. I can't tell you, there's the whole piano story. If that, is that in the book? The piano story? Thank God for
Yes,
Mike
it is.
Vincitor and
It is,
Poughkeepsie.
yep.
You know, those are people that go unmentioned all the time, but without them, that piano wouldn't be sitting up in the studio right now.
We're not going to tell you the story so you can buy the book.
Yeah.
Do we want to wrap it up?
I think you should start volume 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, volume 2, that's a great idea.
Volume 2. Yes, Justin Foy from Radio Woodstock. Hi, Justin.
Oh, Justin must have a story or two.
I have a question, actually.
Yes.
I was at the barn to see ALO. Amy sang with them 2 songs the other night, on a Tuesday night. It was great. It was Atlantic City and Friend of the Devil. I wanted to ask Barbara and John both about the originations of the Keep It Going concept. Were those Levon's words, and how did that get started?
This is a sad story.
Sorry.
Thanks, Justin. Nothing like
But it's
closing,
going, and
closing on a high note.
well, I think thanks to Amy again, who's there on a regular basis still, that the next generation, I mean, his grandson Lee is a killer drummer and musician at the Rock Academy, and so it is going. It is. And I just wondered where that started, and if John, if you referred to that at all in the book.
The Keep It Going was a real thing. It was Levon's words to me when he was in the hospital. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't sure. I struggled with the Keep It Going because at that point they were getting ready to intubate him. And when he looked up at me and he said, "Keep it going," I said, "Yes, of course." And at that moment I thought, "Oh, the Ramble, of course we'll keep it going." And then I thought, wonder if he meant keep it going. Don't.
Keep them alive.
So that was horrible. It was a real struggle for me for a while. But that's where it came from. So when he passed, we had to refund hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just kept writing checks, and that checkbook just it went from where we were nice and cushiony to down to nothing. And okay, now he wants me to keep it going, but we don't have a dime, you know. So I remembered Keep It Going, and I'm thinking, geez, do we capitalize off his last words to me? And then I said, shit, yeah, he would want me to do that. So we did the Keep It Going t-shirts, and we had what do you call those cards things where you person gets the card and it's got and you can get they used to do, no, you could get the download of him. We had recorded him singing "Drown in My Own Tears" at one of the
Digital download card, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So you got that. And we have the mandolin artwork at the, I think it's still up there, where anybody who donated, their names got engraved on a pick. It did pay the mortgage for several months, but it obviously didn't pay it off. But that was a $9,000 a month mortgage that we were faced with, so, you know, so that's the origination of it.
And just to the other point you made, that's not in the book because to end on a high note, the book is about Levon's life and his impact and all these wonderful stories we've heard today. And, you know, so that's, the book is about Levon when he was with us. That was a very conscious decision. There's nothing in there about his, I think there's one brief mention, 1 or 2 lines about his passing. So, no, it's not in there.
It'll be in the next one.
And I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tom and Cathy, Cindy, Barbara, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing it up.